Welcome to the Customer Wins podcast, where business leaders discuss their secrets and techniques for helping their customers succeed and in turn grow their business.
Hi, I'm Rich Walker, the host of The Customer Wins, where I talk to business leaders about how they help their customers win and how their focus on customer experience leads to growth. Some of my past guests have included Patrick Cannon of Fidelity Labs, David Perez with Tax Maverick, and Donald Morgan of Independent Wealth Connections. And today is a special episode in my series on artificial intelligence, and today's guest is Arnulf Hsu, CEO of GReminders. And today's episode is brought to you by Quick, the leader in enterprise forms processing. When your business relies upon processing forms, don't waste your team's valuable time manually reviewing the forms. Instead, get Quick. Using our Form Extract API, simply submit your completed forms and get back clean, context-rich data that reduces manual reviews to only 1 out of 1,000 submissions. Visit quickforms.com to get started. All right, today's guest, Arnulf Hsu, is the CEO of GReminders, an AI-powered meeting management platform for financial advisors. With over 20 years in B2B enterprise software, he's held roles as CEO, CTO, product leader, and board member. Known for turning customer pain points into successful solutions, Arnulf operates at the crossroads of business, product, and tech. He has led companies from startup to acquisition, selling 3 businesses. He also advises early-stage tech companies. Arnulf, welcome to the Customer Wins.
Thanks for having me, Rich.
Man, I love this background of yours. You and I are going to get along. So if you haven't heard this podcast before, I talk with business leaders about what they're doing to help their customers win, how they built and deliver a great customer experience, and the challenges growing their own company. Arnulf, I want to understand your business a little bit better. How does your company help people?
Yeah, so thanks. So GReminders is an AI-powered end-to-end meeting management platform built for wealth managers and financial advisors. And so let me talk more specifically about that sort of abstract statement. Let me talk specifically what that means. So we look through the lens of sort of a meeting lifecycle, right? And so if you're a financial advisor, wealth manager, you're meeting with your clients maybe a couple times a year, once a year. We reach into the systems of records that they have, right? So their CRMs. We understand the cadence that they have with their clients. And we will automatically reach out to their clients to essentially get them to book an annual review or performance review. We continue that process until they actually schedule. So we have an enterprise class scheduling platform where clients are able to select the date and time and so forth. Also provide updates that might exist or might have changed since the last time they met. Those things go on the calendar. We then kick off certain workflows and automations within the CRMs or other engagement systems, such as DocuPace or Precise IP and so on and so forth. We send out notifications to clients to make sure they actually show up, email, SMS, different vehicles like that. Before the meeting, because we're deeply connected to the systems that advisors use every day, before the meeting, we send a pre-meeting brief, so a nice summary of essentially all of the things that have happened since the last time they met with them. Could be various meeting notes, could be activities, tasks, opportunities, portfolio performance, things like that. Again, nice pre-meeting brief. If the advisor has additional questions, we have an agentic AI. So we have basically, think about ChatGPT on top of a client record, essentially. You can ask additional questions. And then once you're in meeting, we have a note taker product that joins Zoom, Microsoft Teams, in-person meetings, does transcriptions, summaries, tasks, recommends opportunities based on content, recommend workflows that might need to get kicked off. And again, pushing all of that back into the system of record, and then help with email follow-ups and things of that. So kind of completing that end-to-end sort of meeting lifecycle, and so we call it end-to-end meeting management platform.
Man, I don't know if you know, I used to be a financial advisor way back in 2001 to 2004. Oh my gosh, I would have loved to have this because everything I did was in Excel. I had it all planned out on a calendar of who needed what by when, and I had to email it myself and follow up and call. This sounds like an assistant in a box, like all rolled up together to handle all these tasks related to the meetings. That's amazing.
We are seeing somewhere upwards of 500 to 600 hours saved per year per advisor. And so, if you look at that on a sort of a business day basis, you're talking about getting 3 or 4 months back per
Yeah,
year. And if you're currently running about 100 clients or something like that, you could probably easily increase that to 130, 150, and you just really get a lot of benefit. And again, nobody became a financial advisor to do all this administrative work.
I know, right?
And so leveraging AI and automations is really sort of the path to get more time.
Oh man, that's so cool. So you said you do integrate with CRMs. I presume that's Redtail and Wealthbox and the likes, right?
We integrate with tons of CRMs. So Redtail, Wealthbox, dominant players, sort of the lower end of the market. We integrate with Salesforce, all of the different overlays. So Practify, Accelerate, Quiver, Elements, Microsoft Dynamics, and the overlays like Tamarack, Smart Office. We integrate with HubSpot, Pipedrive, ActiveCampaign. So we spend a lot of time sort of on the integration side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Interoperable systems is really a big deal in the tech stack, right? So if you want to leverage AI and analytics across your technology stack, these systems better talk to each other.
Yeah.
And if they don't, you have a bunch of data islands that are really not doing anybody any good that might automate a certain type of workflow. But if they don't talk to their system, you end up doing a bunch of manual stuff and really, the automations aren't giving you the full benefit that you need. And so we spend a tremendous amount of time on deeply integrating, right? Not just single sign-on, but going into different objects, custom fields. And there's a lot of nuance in these systems. And while many financial advisors at a sort of 100,000 foot level kind of operate the same, when you get really down into the weeds, there are lots of different nuances there. And so we spend a lot of time making sure that we have the right dials and knobs that can support slightly different sort of work practices in those types of things.
So when did you start this? I'm not familiar with when you guys came to market.
So we started in 2020, so about 4.5 years ago, somewhere in that range. And we started really more horizontally, right? So we weren't necessarily focused on wealth management or financial services back then. We had a bunch of different customers sort of in professional services space.
Mm-hmm.
And that included financial services, that included healthcare, that included other professions like legal and accounting and things of that nature. But around 2022, we wanted to go down a specific vertical, right? And so we did some assessment of kind of what our customer base looked like. We had also hired some folks that sort of came out of the financial services space, specifically wealth management. And really sort of uncovered, some needs and some gaps in this particular area. In our opinion, it had been somewhat underserved, meaning that wealth managers and financial advisors were using tools that were for the general sort of, population.
Right.
And those products are okay. But again, going back to these interoperable systems, they did not integrate with systems like Redtail or Wealthbox or some of these specific overlays. And so we felt there was a gap. We spent the last 2.5 years essentially building integrations and supporting workflows that are very specific to financial services. That's all we do. We live and breathe this industry and space. And we're very happy with the decision. The uptake has been really good. We're growing 120% year on year, and very happy with sort of where we are, and we continue to dig in.
No, that's awesome to hear that, man. Because I think I've seen you at T3 once or twice or something, but we haven't really crossed paths. We do very different things, so to speak. So I want to hear how you leveraged AI, because I saw it in 2022, in the middle of 22 with DALL-E. Then ChatGPT came out in late November that year. And then by January, I said, we're all in. Like everything we do, we're going to be an AI-driven company going forward. What was your view of AI as you built this business, and how did you kind of transform, or did you transform? Were you always AI driven?
We didn't. So when we started in 2020, AI, there was not a lot of talk about generative AI, right? And maybe GPT-1, I think GPT-2 came out maybe somewhere in 21, 22, somewhere in that range. They weren't very good. There wasn't a lot of talk about it. Most of the AI models were really machine learning based, and supervised or unsupervised sort of stuff. But it wasn't really around generative AI, right? So most of the stuff that we were doing at that particular time was really more around automations, right? So if then this that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So we started out with client notifications, and kind of the name of the company, GReminders, it was around the Google ecosystem and a lot around notifications pre-event and sort of post-event. We added scheduling, and then again we continued to sort of add in that particular area. And where we felt that, again, we were looking for use cases, right? So it's not necessarily, if you're a business and you're saying, okay, how, just adding AI to, like, you have to find a use case that makes sense for AI applications. It's not just let's just add AI to something. So find a use case that actually drives real value. And so we were sort of looking for that. And because we're in the sort of calendaring area, what made a lot of sense to us is to leverage call recordings and transcripts, which we weren't really doing till mid part of last year, quite frankly. But we had access to the calendar, right? We had access to all the web meeting providers and so on and so forth. And effectively, by adding that component, it really filled out this sort of meeting management platform that we were talking about here. And so it just fit together really, really nicely. And so now that's effectively part of our value proposition, our kind of value chain. And then also on top of that, now that you have sort of this note taker product that does nice, clean meeting summaries, and action items, those types of things, we then took that and put that onto the sort of pre-meeting side of things. So pulling a bunch of data together, putting together nice pre-meeting briefs, and then now with essentially agentic AI, which is kind of like the chat GPTs or the different systems that might get used in mainstream, get applied to the client right. And so again, leveraging Gen AI to, rather than hunting and pecking into different systems, looking for certain pages or tabs, or you have to search in different places, you just ask a question, just like you would Siri or Alexa or something like that. Again, just makes a lot of sense, and it's very use case driven. So I don't think about it necessarily as just AI for AI's sake, but it's use case where the value lies.
Yeah, I was in an airport a couple of weeks ago, and I saw every single advertisement had the word AI in it. And I don't care what company it was. I mean, it makes sense when Google's talking about it, but I don't know. Does that Dyson vacuum cleaners need to talk about it? And by the way, I don't know if they had that or not, but I mean, just trying to make a silly pun of it. So it told me that it's mainstream. Therefore, using it in marketing is over. Nobody should be using it in marketing anymore because the mainstream has gotten their hooks into it. And I agree with you. I mean, it's a tool set. It's an amazing tool set, but it's a tool set to accomplish very specific things that you're trying to accomplish. You said something earlier that in preparing the meeting brief, and I presume the meeting brief is for the advisor, but does it also get sent to the client?
No. So we don't do that for compliance reasons. And this particular industry, especially is very compliance and sort of governance centric. And so no, that just gets sent to the advisor, but it helps them better prepare for the session.
Yeah. So I'll mention something else because HubSpot is the CRM we use. They came out with a Copilot, and the initial version of it I thought was great. Lately, I can't use it. Anytime I ask it a question, it can't find the answer. And I don't know what happened. But I love that idea of like, oh, I don't want to go search for the records and find the right one and find that one note that was 3 months ago. I love that idea that you can just say, find it.
So a lot of, almost every system will have some sort of agent. And it is very easy for, I think, organizations to say, we have an agent. But what is the quality, right, of that agent, just like you were talking about? So you can have a checkbox, but does it actually perform, and is it useful, and is the output accurate, right? And so to get that kind of accuracy and to get that quality requires a tremendous amount of time working with the data set that underlies all of this. And again, sort of back to interoperable system, just like you would train a human to say, if I ask you this question, you have to go look in this file cabinet, go look over here. This is where I store this. This is how I categorize something, right? It's the same process, but really in sort of a more programmatic manner.
So that's what you guys are doing. Like you say, this is where the data lives. This is the only place to get it from.
Yes, depending on what you're looking for, right? So a lot of it is pointing the systems into the right places and making sure that the naming convention matches with what is actually being asked. And so as a result, again, it's very use case driven. So we look at a lot of the inputs and we look at some of the outputs to make sure that, in fact, the quality is where we generally need it to be. And that takes a lot of effort, right? It's not just go build an agent and point it at a raw generic data set and let it loose. It doesn't really work like that. And so the quality, it takes a tremendous amount of time to get quality up. And if firms, if independent software vendors like ourselves and others aren't doing that, you're just not going to get the output that you want, and as a result, having an agent that has low utility, well, it's just not going to get used. And I think you talked a lot about everybody's talking about AI, and I think that's very true. And everybody wants to add AI to their system, but again, just figure out where the value lies and what the use cases are. And so, in our opinion, in our particular field here, especially around meetings, call transcript summaries, there's huge value add there, right? Because you don't have to take notes. You get this stuff pushed back to your system of record, which you didn't want to do anyways, because you didn't want to type it in and so on and so forth. So let AI and automation do that for you. Pre-meeting briefs, again, very good application. And the agentic AI, again, it's work in progress. And I would say our quality is good, but we continue to enhance that on a daily basis.
Yeah. I think for the average person who might just be using ChatGPT, this is similar to how you write good versus bad prompting. If you write just a basic prompt that says, I don't know, give me feedback on this transcript, it's just going to give you generic feedback. But if you give it 10 transcripts and other sources of who you are and say, this is who I am, this is the kind of feedback I want, this is the role I want you to play, et cetera, and you give it all this context and be very, very specific, gives you the kind of feedback you want now. And so that's kind of what you're saying about you got to plan out where it's going to go to get the right data. So I want to ask you another question, because in those generative large language models, a lot of people understand the concept of hallucination, where the system makes up information that wasn't necessarily relevant to that data point, right? How do you ensure, as a company, how do you monitor for that? How do you ensure that it's not pulling a different client's information and putting it in the brief for this client, or making stuff up? Like, I don't hold IBM stock. Why did you think I have IBM stock?
So a couple things. Prompt engineering is a real thing, and spending time on prompt engineering pays dividends. So that's one. But really the second thing around, especially around hallucinations, is you got to keep the context narrow, right? So the narrower you keep the context, the higher quality of the output. And so when we have agentic AI, it's actually sitting on top of a specific client household or a specific client record. And so the scope of the data set is just narrowed to that particular household or that particular contact. And so we have not expanded the scope of that yet to be sort of firm-wide for the exact reasons that you're talking about. The other thing we also do, which was very important to us, is that we would also always cite the source of where that summary or that sentence came from. So anytime you ask a question, you might get some statements back. It always tells you, and it would link you back to the source so that you could verify, in fact, oh, this is where it came from, and maybe my input data was wrong to begin with, perhaps, but at least it's always telling you this is the source of the data, so you can essentially verify that yes, in fact, that is what was said, or that is the task that was referenced, that sort of thing.
Yeah. All right. So let's get a little bit techie here for a second. In technology companies like ours, you have monitoring for server uptime and throughput and database usage and all these things so that you can keep your system alive, keep it high performing, that kind of stuff. Is there a way to monitor these agents, these large language models, these implementations you have for errors or hallucinations if you want?
So a couple things. A, it's difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine.
B, you are looking for feedback loops, right? So one is we ask customers to rate, thumbs up, thumbs down, right? So very basic stuff that helps give feedback back to us to say, hey, this was a quality response, this was not a quality response. And so we then look at that feedback, and when we get thumbs both on either side of that, quite frankly, we look at we look at that feedback, and when it's thumbs down, we look a bit deeper and say, okay, why is that? Did we not have access to that data? As data lives in a variety of different systems, right? Mm-hmm. And so we may have access to 2 of the 5 systems that they use on a regular basis. And so if that data resides in other systems, we may not have access to it. So therefore, we may need to go build integrations into those systems. There's also a bunch of development happening, to the extent that your audience is following some of this, but because every system is going to have an agent to some degree, there are now standards being developed that are agent-to-agent communication, right? So one agent is going to be talking to another agent, and another agent is going to be talking to another agent, and then there's sort of agent orchestration. And again, this is a very rapid sort of developed area that's rapidly developing, as these sort of standards come to be. And so we're spending time monitoring that, and to some degree, it's sometimes better to be almost like a quick second mover than a sort of a first mover, because you end up having to retool a bunch of different things. But feedback, just go back to your original question. Feedback loop is really very important. And then we also monitor ourselves to see because oftentimes if the system's not able to give a response, again, we're looking at why is that the case, where is that data living. And knowing those systems and where the data resides is very, very important. That's super critical. And again, like the narrower the context and the narrower the use case, the better the output.
Yeah. So this agent-to-agent model is something I was predicting at least 6 months ago. I was telling my wife about it. She's a case manager in a hospital. And a lot of her job is calling on facilities like, hey, do you have a bed available for, post-care, for nursing, for whatever? Do you have oxygen tanks available? Can I get a ride for this person? All that kind of stuff, right? And so she's on the phone a lot or sending messages, emails back and forth. Why couldn't that job be an agent talking to the agent at the skilled nursing facilities, talking to the agent at the oxygen tank facility, and just, negotiating with each other? And a lot of the interactions that I think we have on a daily basis are going to become that. And I think, how do we as individuals get our own agent to go book my repair for my automobile or whatever little things we need to do? You're obviously thinking this way because you brought it up.
So that's all coming, right? So everything you described will come to be. It does take time to work it through, all the various systems that exist. The large technology players, right? Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Facebook, etc. They are working on general agents, right? General assistants sort of thing. But that's probably the most difficult because it has the widest context window, right? It has the widest, and it needs to be connected to a variety of different systems. And those systems, again, there's authentication, right? There's privacy. There's all kinds of things that need to be dealt with, and those will all get resolved over time.
Yeah.
But once generally systems have agents, And there are standards, right? So just like the web standard, the HTTP standard, these types of standards that exist, agents will be able to effectively discover other agents, right? And then you would authenticate those, and then you would have access to your data, in these other systems, right? And so all of this stuff sort of takes time, but these standards are on their way. Anthropic has put forth something called MCP. Google has put forth something called agent to agent recently, and so there are a bunch of things happening in this space, and various vendors are adopting it, as are we as well.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time. It's also highly challenging, right? Because if you're running a business, you're asking, should I be building agents? Because I could augment what I do. And I keep coming back to the conclusion of I should buy products like yours because you're building the agent specific to the need and specific to the systems that are in place. I don't necessarily want to go out and build a bunch of agents unless it's a custom system I own and I developed. What is the future for you guys? And actually, I want to ask this in another context. There has been a lot of interest and excitement in your competitors and the whole note-taking idea. In fact, I think it's a disservice to call them note takers because it's so much more than note-taking. Where do you see what you're doing evolving to?
So, kind of as I was saying earlier, I think there's a lot of data, in these unstructured areas, right? Like transcripts and email and so on and so forth, more so than there is in some of the systems of records. And I think system like ours and others that are playing sort of in this area can help really enhance and enrich, the systems of record. So I think that's where a lot of this is sort of heading. I think the agentic AI, and again, like the quality needs to improve. We need to have access to more systems. But again, I think as a firm, you will tend to gravitate to some sort of agent, which might be your primary first class citizen sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then that system will interface with the other system. So it doesn't really matter sort of where you perhaps ask the assistant. Could be in your CRM, could be in our system, could be in some other system. They will essentially all sort of effectively kind of talk to each other over time.
Yeah.
But in general, all of this automation and AI is, again, like giving you sort of superpowers in that it really dramatically creates a ton of efficiency. And I think people that over time do not leverage this type of tech, will to some degree fall behind.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I almost don't want to ask this question because I might think there's a bias in it, but do you see AI? Do you ever see AI as a threat to what you're doing? Because I mean, obviously you see it as opportunity because you're using it and you're applying it. I see it as opportunity, but I also see it as threat. So I'm kind of curious how you kind of see this fast evolution and transformation that AI is bringing.
I wouldn't say a threat. We're certainly leveraging it. We see it as a huge lift and a huge sort of opportunity in general. I think sometimes folks in general see AI as sort of a zero-sum game, where AI is coming for employment and those types of things. I don't necessarily take that sort of approach. That concept sort of assumes that everybody has sort of full employment and everybody is doing all the things that need to be done. And the reality is, in every company I've ever been part of, there have never been enough resources to do X, Y, and Z, right? And so,
isn't that the truth? Oh my gosh! Thanks for saying that.
So as a result, I think if automations and AI can take some of the sort of more administrative stuff off of people's hands, they can start working on higher value things, or being more proactive about client engagement and so on and so forth. So I don't take the sort of more nihilistic approach of it's gonna it may affect employment in some areas, right? I'm not saying it won't, but generally speaking, we see it as a net positive.
I've never had somebody say, Rich, your software is going to put me out of a job because it's going to fill out forms for me. Because who wants to fill out forms? I mean, seriously. It's just like, I didn't really want to manage the calendar in Excel and send out 5 emails to each client over a 6-month period to remind them of our meetings, to collect their data. I didn't want to enter more notes into my CRM. I don't want to do a lot of the things that your product is doing. And I certainly don't want to do the things my product is doing to make it better. So yeah, why don't we eliminate the dirty work and let them do better work? Man, I got to wrap this up. I'm really enjoying talking to you. Before I get to my last question, what is the best way for people to find and connect with you?
So you can go to our website, GReminders.com. You can also hit me up on LinkedIn, Arnulf Hsu. And if you want to send an email, it's arnulf@GReminders.com.
Awesome. All right. So this is one of my favorite questions. Who has had the biggest impact on your leadership style and how you approach your role today?
Oh, there have been a lot of folks that have impacted sort of how I think about the world. I ask, I'm sort of a product centric individual, so I ask a lot of questions. I ask why 5 times until I finally understand what the root cause is, and things like that. A couple people sort of that come to mind, famous people would be, folks like, Steve Jobs, for example, very much sort of, product centric individual, spent a lot of time on, building beautiful products that people love, and spending a lot of time, understanding, how they operate, and again, being very detail oriented and constantly sort of iterating on that. Mm-hmm. So I would say, certainly, somebody famous would be Steve Jobs. Another friend of mine, his name was Steve Krause, also Steve. He is a very product centric individual, and taught me a lot about sort of building product that people love to use.
Yeah. So I'm a product guy too. I've had to learn sales. I learned engineering so I could build product, but I love bringing things to life, and I love seeing it in a way that it should be versus what it is, so that you can make it better and better over time.
Well, sales is just solving people's problems, right? Like, you don't have to, if you solve a problem, you make the sale. I mean, that's generally how I think about sales.
You know what? My very first company when I was 12 was selling a toy for water fights. And it was so obvious everybody wanted it. I didn't have to sell it at all. I just had to have the supply for people to buy. So I kind of grew up with this idea of being an entrepreneur means give people what they want and they'll buy it from you. It's not even a challenge to sell it. I learned in software it can be quite challenging. And you come from the business to business enterprise sales world. It can be quite challenging to navigate the structure of a company and their initiatives and their timeframes and all of that. That I think is art. Trying to figure.
Yes, I mean, there is a framework for enterprise selling, right? So it's more difficult to do product-led growth in the enterprise. It's much more easier to do that on the SMB side. But so there is you got to identify stakeholders and figure out how the buying cycle works and all of that. But at the end of the day, it's still about solving a problem, right?
It is. Absolutely.
And if you can solve the problem and do it effectively, and again, navigate the enterprise sales cycle, you will be quite successful.
Yeah. And with enterprise, it's usually at a scale that's quite nice.
Right.
All right. I got to wrap this up. I want to give a big thank you to Arnulf Hsu, CEO of GReminders, for being on this episode of The Customer Wins. Go check out Arnulf's website at GReminders.com. And don't forget to check out Quick at quickforms.com, where we make processing forms easier. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. We'll click the like button, share this with someone, and subscribe to our channels for future episodes of The Customer Wins. Arnulf, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Rich. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Customer Wins podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.